who take pleasure in twilight, whose souls are lured by noise to every treacherous abyss.
As night falls, another Austin emerges, almost as though another city exists in an alternate dimension.
Because last night, the weirdest thing happened.
And in that world exists the underbelly of crime, drugs, and terror in the night. In the deep night, there is terror of women being raped, the sexual abuse of small children, gangs and drug kings.
I actually think this whole flap, whatever the Russians may have intended with their hacking, has made it much more...
In my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in. To kind of catapult the propaganda.
Hardliners on
14-foot cobra with 9-inch fangs, firing lasers out of its eyes with 17 Godzillas, shooting flying saucers out of their nose.
I have 2 words for you. Predator drones.
I'm gonna bomb the shit out of them.
You will never see it coming.
I don't care.
So you understand the words I'm saying to you?
You think I'm joking?
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is that there are known knowns and that there are known unknowns. But there's also unknown unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know.
They are not what they claim to be.
America is now under martial law.
PsiOp-Radio. Decoding the psychological warfare machinations within paranormal and parapolitical landscape. PsiOp-Radio. Welcome, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis.
And Mack White.
And this is PsiOp-Radio, canonical number 184, live from Central and North Texas, points all around the universe that is your brain. It is it April Fool's Day, Mac? Wait.
That was yesterday.
I feel foolish making such a joke. Before the break, we were talking about synthetic telepathy and the possibility of these technologies being driven by social media billionaire entrepreneurs and the other entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, and these other strange technologies and possible perceptions of alternate dimensions. Something that may or may not have anything to do with any of that is this strange experience that typically seems to happen in a physical locale and become associated with that locale in its name, and it's experienced by multiple people. And what I'm speaking of is the mystery hum.
Yes.
Going back to the 90s, the 1990s, when I was really at the height of my obsession and networking with people who were similarly obsessed with these subjects, what I often refer to the 1990s zine scene community of paranormal and parapolitical minded individuals who were publishing print magazines dealing with all these wide range of topics. And there was an upsurge, obviously, with the X-Files and in the wake of Twin Peaks. This new media interest in the thing that had largely been ridiculed previously, but now is being cashed in on with the popularity of the X-Files. And that's when I probably first started hearing about the Taos hum or other geographically centered mystery hums. This idea that apparently periodically around the world, for no known certain reason, a bunch of people start hearing a weird noise. Not everybody can hear it, but usually multiple people hear it in a geographic area, and it develops a name like the Taos, New Mexico hum, or the other many other locations around the world that have developed these. And strangely enough, just over a year ago, I experienced something akin to this phenomena, something that I personally experienced that I'm like, what is this? Well, this seems like that thing that I've read about. And it all started the weekend of Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday. and back in January of 2016. And I started perceiving, mainly at home, mainly in certain rooms, a low-frequency humming sound that, it sounded to me kind of like the HVAC system, the heating system, like the heating element and the blowers in a big house's powerful AC heating HVAC system, or really more like a larger one in a bigger facility. But it also reminded me of like the sound of a plane, turboprop airplane, not a jet, but a turboprop airplane's engines, or actually more even like maybe like a blimp's as it approached. Like if you're inside the house and you hear one of these things approaching, but without the Doppler effect that would indicate something approaching, flying over, and then passing away, that shift, that Doppler shift that you hear. So, here are a couple of sounds. One, when I was doing research online to find something similar to the sound, here is a couple of things. This is actually like propeller sounds, and here's the irony. Here is I discovered in looking for similar sounds that I was thinking of that sounded like this once it went away, and basically this lasted for about 26 days, so just under a month. And I'll go into more, but here is some propeller sounds. And see, that's got the Doppler effect. You can hear it, it's coming towards you, and then it eventually goes away, and it changes. But that's kind of similar. But the interesting thing to me was in looking at this YouTube video, it's titled Airplane Engine, Propeller Sound Anti-Tinnitus. Well, I mentioned that in my day job I work doing audiobooks for the print disabled. Well, over the years I've developed quite a reputation in the national network for my hearing. I can hear stuff that other people can't. It's annoying because I can hear stuff and I'm like, don't you hear that? Isn't that an annoying tone? And they're like, I don't hear anything. But if you put it through a spectrogram, you can see this frequency, and then it can be gotten rid of, and then I don't hear it anymore. And I suspect actually a lot of people are like this. They just don't ever have the opportunity to discover it. But I've also, in the midst, all these years of having a good reputation for a good ear, have also been told, or rather, I've experienced pretty much since I was a child, tinnitus, classic high-pitched ringing in the ears. And so I'm very familiar with, those times when it becomes so annoying that you can't avoid it. It can be pretty maddening, but it's high frequency, and you just kind of get used to it, and you eventually tune it out, and you just don't even hear it, except when you do. But there are sufferers who have a hard time getting rid of it, and apparently there are tons of YouTube videos that are categorized as anti-tinnitus videos, and apparently the sound of an aircraft engine, is one of the sounds that's very popular. And so this video, this thing I'm playing in the background, is over an hour and a half of propeller sounds for anti-tinnitus use. Now, that's not the exact kind of sound that I heard, but that's kind of what I imagine it describing like. And I actually described this experience as my stealth blimps. For the conspiracy minded, post 9/11, y'all might remember, Alex Jones and others reporting on the fact that the Homeland Security and others are increasingly using surveillance blimps and other surveillance aircraft and whatnot. But this idea of just anchoring, the old style military balloons and weather balloons, but anchoring them up high so that they can actually just be floating surveillance platforms. And so they're up there watching me, Mac. Yeah. I can hear them because they don't sound just like propellers. They sound almost like blimps, and blimps have a certain sound, don't they? I always thought they sounded similar to the propeller plane, but so I found some blimp sound effects. And because of course blimps can hover, they don't just, approach and recede, and you get the Doppler effect. And these are similar. This is not what I was really hearing. It was much deeper than this. Anyway, I did find another video that kind of got a better sound of what was sounding like to me, and it's another propeller one, and it's called Propeller Sound Effect Sleep. So this is for people who want to fall asleep. So it's like a white noise. And that's much like what I was hearing.
You know, that reminds me
and I can
of what I heard.
I can give some more details and some other follow-up, but yeah, I can't believe you. So this was from January to February for me, about 26 days. It wasn't every day. It wasn't everywhere, though I think it actually may have caused a sensitivity to low frequency stuff. So I think I started hearing it or similar sounds elsewhere, but it was mainly in my house. But you say you experienced something like this too in October?
In October, yes. And I had forgotten about it until in your email today you mentioned this, and then I thought, wow, I wish I had thought at the time to tell you about it. But I did write down what I was hearing, and I got up in the middle of the night and came in here to the computer, and I just typed it out, and I'm just going to read here what I typed. Starting yesterday, October 29th, 2016, I began hearing an intermittent low-frequency hum. It appears to come from outside. It is an electrical-sounding hum like you might hear on speakers. It is not loud, but gradually builds in volume, then fades away, lasting maybe 30 seconds. Then, a few seconds later, it starts again. Same sound, same duration. Then, a few seconds pass, and the sound starts again. This being the third and final time, after which it is not heard for a while. I'm estimating 2 or 3 hours. I heard this about 4 times during the day. It happens quickly. It is over before I can go outside and listen. A while ago, around 1:15 a.m., the sound woke me. Now, Diane was hearing it too, I should mention. It didn't wake Diane. She was asleep. Now, this is 1:15 a.m., which is, I'm writing this about 1:30 in the morning. It seemed slightly louder than yesterday, perhaps because sound carries farther at night. So, the day before, I heard it during the daytime. I got up, went to the computer, and did some research. Strange hums have been reported all over the world for years, and the descriptions vary widely. And in my searching, I found out that about a year ago, there were reports of humming in Fort Worth, where I am right now. Some speculate that it was originating at the Naval Air Base, formerly called the Carswell Air Force Base on the northwest side of Fort Worth. Humming noises have also been attributed to seismic activity in different parts of the world. I found a video searching a while ago, linked below, that purports to be the sound of HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, HAARP. What we've been hearing is similar, but not quite the same. The sound starts at the 357 mark, and I got the link here. It's documenting all of this. Maybe this is nothing. On the other hand, with all the weirdness in the news, the election, the possibility of war, maybe it's related somehow. I heard the sound, and now I'm writing the next morning, or the next day. I heard the sound one more time around 9:30 a.m., and since then haven't heard it again. It is very strange and gives me a creepy feeling. If it was related to seismic activity, which I had read that somewhere, that's why I'm writing this. If it was related to seismic activity, perhaps it had something to do with the big earthquake in Italy that occurred shortly after I awoke at 1:15 a.m., okay, the night before. And then I go on writing, I say, I suspect ELF, E-L-F. The regularity of the noise and the eerie tone suggest an artificial source, possibly military. We haven't heard the noise since yesterday morning around 9:30. I can't be certain, of course, but it felt to me like some kind of test emanating from the Naval Air Base. And I go on to say a few other things, talking about politics and what have you. Anyway, so I wrote these things down over the course of about 3 days. That's what I heard.
Wow. So first, I think your example of this is it helps just show how people might come to grips with something like this, especially if it only lasts a certain length of time. The longer it lasts, the more potentially debilitating it could be. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, just to give a fuller experiencing of what it was like for me, it did become scary because first of all, I was never able to confirm anybody else hearing it. The only two people who I were able to witness it with me were female, my wife and a friend. And male and female hearing tends to be very different, especially different frequencies. They could both hear some of the high frequency pitch stuff of the electronics in one of the rooms that I was hearing it most loudly, which is actually the room I'm in right now, transmitting this signal out to you, Mack, everybody, and to everybody in the world, and to the aliens. And I mostly heard it. I heard it loudest and best and strongest in the evenings or the early morning, and it wasn't every day. And for most days, I'm at my day job. And I wasn't seemingly hearing it there and other places, but I absolutely I went from room to room trying to see if which rooms were loudest. My bedroom was loud. My office where I'm transmitting the Radio Ranch was the loudest, and the living room was less loud, which is funny because it's a big open space. It's a very high vaulted ceiling space. And I could even hear it outside. I could go out my front door and I could go out my back door and I could listen, but it had to be really quiet. So it had to be like either late in the evening or early in the morning before traffic and other sounds had drowned it out. And I think, like tinnitus, it seemed like it was partly just a sensitivity to lower frequencies for some strange reason. And having some past experience reading about this phenomenon, I know that it seems to manifest in a variety of frequencies, and there seems to be this consensus that it's a low frequency that is perceived as being outside. And I have to say, though, right off the bat, like, my sense at this point is still, I'm pretty 50-50. It could easily be some kind of weird internal phenomena that my body just suddenly was perceiving lower frequency more easily, and or it was, hearing something in the body that I normally wouldn't hear, and it was completely internal in that sense. Or 50% it was external. It was some kind of actual mystery outside me that I was perceiving, but that not everybody around me could perceive. And
but your wife heard it, just as
she didn't.
Heard it.
No, my wife did not. My wife and my friend. I thought you said she did. Nobody else was able. I was not able to corroborate this sound with anybody else. I stupidly did not start dragging my friends in and going, "Can you hear that, dudes?" Which I wanted to do, but and I stupidly did not, and I regret that. But it got, what became scary for me was when it would get loud, and I'm in the house, and I'm thinking, if this doesn't stop, I don't know what I'll do. We'll have to move. And then the thought of what if it's not something I can get away from? It's like this sound would just drive me nuts. And the thing is, again, I've dealt with high frequency, traditional tinnitus, high frequency ringing in the ears. And I remember one late night, I was hearing the sound, and I was thinking, low frequency tinnitus. Is there such a thing? So I searched for it, and sure enough, in tinnitus forums, you see people, the most common phenomena is high frequency, and there are sufferers of low frequency. So I'm wondering if it could be that. But so in researching all of this, around June of last year may have been the first only public statement I made about having experienced this. And in the Anomaly Archives newsletter, for June 15th, 2016, I wrote, "Meanwhile, in this week's Anomaly News Roundup, there are several articles of interest, including a New York Times article, United States of Paranoia, about the people who feel they are the victims of gang stalking. That article even touches on those who feel they are being attacked by ELF mind control technology and mystery hum related phenomena." And there's lots of hyperlinks there. 2 years ago, Jared Keller wrote another excellent and comprehensive article on the mystery hums that also touched on the mind control element, but also documents the various research into finding the sound's ultimate source. And there's been some success in this, and this is where I thankfully had already read some accounts of this and had a way of trying to investigate it, which I haven't really mentioned yet. Earlier this year, I myself experienced a series of mysterious, deep humming-like effects over a period of time, about 26 days, just under a month. In this week's news roundup, we also have a new article from The Guardian about the Windsor hum, another famous one. Now, there are hums that are quickly identified, like, I forget which city, but I think I have a link to it in the Anomaly Archives page for the mystery hum phenomena, and there's so many around the world, from Bondi in Australia to British Columbia and Canada, and the Windsor hum in Ontario, Canada, New Zealand and Auckland. California's had some. The Yakima Indian Reservation has some great documentation on mystery hums and where there was being a UFO flap at the time. And so the sound in all these different instances, it's often described as like a dynamo or a generator running off in the distance, or a diesel truck engine idling nearby, or a number of different low frequency sounds. But again, not everybody can hear it. Sometimes it's only certain people, but in the best documented cases, it's masses of people. And in one of these Canadian cases, the local Canadian officials, and this is all on the record, commissioned an investigation, and they came to the conclusion, their scientists did their research and came to the conclusion that the sound was coming from across the border in the United States at a metal foundry, and that it was one of these big foundry devices that was causing this low frequency hum. And huge HVAC systems for these underground facilities or giant giant commercial complexes are suspected in a lot of these. But in my own experience of it, I started knowing these possible sources and just my own deductive processes. I started first on a bicycle, and then I realized that I needed to be kind of sound isolated to hear it. It seemed. And so I rode around the neighborhood on my bike and tried to just be real quiet, and during the time of day when there was not much activity, and see if I could hear it, and try to see if I could get a sense of a radius. And then tried this in my car and drove around, but I also was looking for construction equipment, could there be some kind of digging going on? There's lots of all this growth in Austin, though there's lots of construction. But even when I was hearing it, I wasn't seeing any actual activity, though I did find some nearby construction sites that I was unaware of that would have that kind of activity. But again, what I was hearing was a more constant throbbing sound, as opposed to intermittent, that's a big bulldozer backing up and then moving and then backing up and then moving. And I also came across various structures, big empty cement pipes that could almost be like a giant flute if the wind went through it right, or what do they call an aeolian harp? The weird sounds that can be created by wind going over high tension power lines, and a harp sound created by wind over wires. And there also nearby is an underground both natural gas and petroleum oil pipelines nearby. So I thought, well, that probably has some kind of audio signature, frequency signature that probably most humans can't hear. Maybe probably not. Again, 50% chance. It's all in my head, and this has just been my experiencing of some kind of weird internal process that lasted about 26 days. But it really scared the bejesus out of me, because when the moment hit, when I was like, well, what if I can't get away from it? What if okay, we have to move? That would be terrible. But then what if we move and I still experience it? Then I'm just fucked. Yeah. So and I mentioned those articles that back in June of last year seemed to be pushing this idea of a mind control element. And in one of the articles that I was made aware of during a wave of mainstream media coverage of this was by there's a scientist that's researching it, Glenn. Let's see, what's his name? I'm going to get it wrong. Glenn McPherson, who's running the hum.info and a blog about his collecting a database of this, and it's just thousands and thousands of reports from around the world. And of course, he's got a process going where he's taking in these reports and plotting them on a Google-enabled map, and so you can enter your own report. I flubbed it the first time I tried, and it didn't actually take. And then it was only like November of last year that I finally got my entry in. And with his March update of this year, 2017, my official report is there. I don't know, is it just, again, is it low frequency tinnitus? Am I not experiencing something that's the world hum, this phenomena where multiple people usually in an area are hearing this thing? And your suspicion about ELF. And the mind control or the military communications aspect of that, that's all documented as far as both the use for often like think submarine communication, using these extremely huge waves that can't be shielded against, that can be used to communicate across the face of this round ball we're all on. A lot of people have suspected that, and in June of last year, there was a lot of mainstream articles that were linking the hum phenomenon with the mass shooters, like the Navy shipyard shooter, where he had carved on the stock of his gun, "This is my elf weapon," and the suspicion and supposition is that he was suffering from believing that he was being targeted, electronically harassed with ELF mind control technology. And maybe he was, maybe he was just, mentally disturbed for other reasons. But that angle was being pushed by a number of articles in the mainstream media. Now, this Glenn McPherson guy is very much a non-sensational. He's not interested in any of that. He's just interested in collecting the data and doing good science to try to figure out the source of this, because there should be a way to figure this out. In some cases, like what I mentioned, the Canadian case where the government commissioned scientists in their lab coats figured out that allegedly it was this foundry. It's those damn Americans industrial complex across the river that's causing the sound. In other instances, there's really interesting sounds that have been recorded, and you can watch the YouTube videos. I think it's in England, where a particular architecturally unique building has created a weird sound, and the architect is even made a public apology to the locals because of the horrible sound it makes when the wind rushes around it, because of its special unique shape. And so there's those rare instances like that, but then you've got the media and others just going, oh, it's the sound of fish mating in the oceans that some people can hear, it's people hearing, the Navy's ELF sub communications, and then, something more nefarious. It would never have driven me to kill, I swear.
Yeah. I don't think these were being reported prior to the 90s. I never heard about such a thing, and it's only been in recent decades that, to my knowledge, that this sort of thing has been reported. And the fact that you have areas, geographical locations, where a lot of people are hearing it, like Dallas, New Mexico. Or I mentioned a while ago that a year prior to what I heard in my late night internet searching, trying to figure out what's going on, people were hearing it in Fort Worth, and it seemed to them that it was coming from the Naval Air Base. And I add to that, first of all, I had the perception, like you did, that it was coming from outside, that it wasn't coming from someplace inside the house. And also there's the fact that Diane was hearing it too.
Yeah.
And the other thing was the regularity of it. It would happen every few hours, 2 to 3 hours. And then it would happen in 3 cycles, about 30 seconds each, that it would stop. And I could almost count on the fact that it would come back twice more. And so the other thing, too, that I looked up that evening was YouTube videos where people had actually went out in their backyard with a video camera, and they recorded what they attributed to activity coming from these HAARP towers in Alaska. They took a video of the sky sort of lighting up, flickering a little bit, and these weird humming sounds with almost like chiming noises interspersed, which isn't exactly what I was hearing, but it felt artificial, and it was so regular that I had to attribute it to something artificial, not fishes mating in the ocean or necessarily seismic activity deep in the earth, but it went on for 3 days and then it stopped, and it was disturbing.
Yeah. Well, so it was, I never did get a witness for the phenomenon, but like I say, I started seemingly being more sensitive to the sound, or rather lower level sound. And then one day at work, in my day job, we're digitizing thousands of audiobooks recorded on analog reel-to-reel tape by the volunteers for the last 30 years or so. And as I were digitizing one, I'm listening to the recording of one of them, and we do it at high speed, so it's all sped up. And as I'm listening to it, I hear the tone. I hear like the same similar tone, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I hear it! Oh my God, it's on this recording!" And I'm immediately intrigued because it's, here I've got a recording of something that's very similar. Now this is months after I'd experienced this, so it's really been odd, like trying to pin down what it sounded like. That propeller sound that I last played the longest seemed to be the closest representation of it. But here I was able to play this sound for my friends at work, all male, 3 or 4 other guys, and they were like, "Yeah, I hear that, and that's a really weird, throbbing, bassy sound." And I'm playing it in the background right now. It's just so quiet, I don't think you can hear it, but anyway, I've got a WAV file of it, so I call it pure drone tone. Anyway, here, just ending on this, I'm really proud of this Glenn McPherson guy who's trying to do good science and collect the reports and doing his best to eliminate the probable source of these things. And he's open to what it could be. And of all the news outlets, Al Jazeera just did, this was a year ago, a video about him. And here's that. It's a couple of minutes.
Not only a very beautiful environment here, but it's also a very quiet environment.
At his home in the rainforest along Canada's Pacific coast, Glenn McPherson researches something that science says shouldn't exist. But it does for him. He hears it every night.
When I first moved here, on my first night after the house quieted down, I was actually taken aback at how loud the hum was.
The worldwide hum is usually described as a low-pitched rumble, like a car or truck engine idling nearby, with electronics pulsing. This is a simulation.
We'll be finding out soon enough whether or not the world hum is as prevalent in Asia as it is in the English-speaking world.
Now, after 4 years, his worldwide hum and database project has found nearly 13,000 people on 5 continents who've emailed to say they're hearing something. The number's too large, McPherson says, to dismiss as hysteria, delusion, or belief in the supernatural.
given that people arrive at this independently, and now looking at the hum map and looking at the distribution of the geographic distribution and the distribution in age and gender, what these people are reporting is something that is certainly real for them.
This paper from the University of Oklahoma 12 years ago links the sound to a U.S. military program that uses VLF, very low frequency radio, and aircraft to communicate with nuclear submarines underwater. It's the first of 4 explanations that Glenn is pursuing.
Second, the hum is the grand accumulation of human activity in low frequency sound and infrasound. Third, that the hum is a terrestrial geological phenomenon. And fourth, the hum might well be an internally generated phenomenon by the body.
Let's just throw this off.
Using a specially built steel box that's supposed to block radio waves, Glenn wants to eliminate all outside sources for the sound. Yet so far the hum is still there, even inside the box. That means new approaches and trying different technology, trying to, as he puts it, give himself and thousands of others around the world the quiet life they deserve. Daniel Lack, Al Jazeera, on Canada's Pacific Coast.
So, in that video, the box at the end, it's like an isolation tank type box, only it's like basically a Faraday cage to take out electromagnetic energy to try to eliminate that as a source. But it's kind of creepy.
Yes, it is. And again, it feels to me like it's artificial. And the fact that there, to my knowledge, are no reportings of these noises before the past, 2 or 3 decades is an indicator that it must be artificial, and that it tends to happen more in certain geographical locations than others. Taos, New Mexico, or again here in Fort Worth, and that people, were attributing it to something military. That being a subjective call, of course, but and the regularity of it. And there's so much weird secret technology that we don't know anything about that's not such a far-fetched idea.
Yeah, you're right about the dates going back. Of course, I think the earliest record I have is the Bristol, United Kingdom, back in the 60s. Mysterious Bristol hum perplexes residents of English City. Mystery hum, listen to spooky sound that baffled scientists for 40 years. After new claims, it is now recorded on camera. And then in the 70s and other places, but I don't think we have any reports going back further than that. But yeah, when you think, it seems like we would, if it's a geological thing, if it's from earthquakes, you'd think there'd be other similar cases going back. But anyway, fascinating. I'm so glad I'm not hearing it anymore, dude. I really, yeah. I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill here. There were moments where I was really scared for my future as just somebody trying to survive day to day. I thank God I wasn't hearing it nonstop. And I've heard about like tinnitus sufferers, like that the high frequency is apparently easier to cope with than low frequency, that the people who report constant low frequency tinnitus are more likely to maybe go insane. I'm not trying to paint any class of people with a disability, but it's interesting though. Again, that ELF aspect and the conjunction of possible copycat effect or suicidal ideation, people who think they're being harassed, even though we all know that there have been plenty of campaigns, official and unofficial, of humans harassing humans. But anyway, well, if you experience it again, Mac, or you come across any more information, I would love to hear about it. I'm glad that I got my report in there. Like I say, I'm not sure if it's, like he was saying, internally generated, possibly, or externally, but... and when the anniversary came around and it didn't happen again, I was so relieved.
Well, I'm glad that we talked about this, because until you mentioned it today in the email, I had forgotten about it. And wow, then it came back. I experienced a hum. for 3 days in a row, and then it stopped as quickly as it began, and it was a few times a day. And that's all I know about it. I can only guess and speculate what it was. It was disturbing. I know that. I mean, it was a weird, eerie thing to just hear.
Well, a few days ago, another Eastern Daily Press, that's edp24.co.uk, reports, "Do you know what it is? Mystery surrounds hum in Cromer." So it's like a UFO flap, man. It's like there's always one going on somewhere.
Yeah. Well, well, next time it happens, if it happens, and I hope it doesn't, I'll let you know right away, and I'll log into that reporting website and describe it. Now that I know that website exists.
Yeah. Your entry isn't recorded in the database immediately. It's a process where he collects a bunch of data and then combs through it and then posts it. So I'm wondering if the first time I submitted it, if there was something I said that made him go, no, this is totally not what I'm talking about. Because obviously he's got to weed out some reports, and he, does shy away from the more sensationalistic aspects of this that involve connecting it to things like gang stalking or mind control, harassment kind of stuff. But seems like the perfect technology to me for accomplishing that. But
yeah, absolutely.
So please don't use that on me again. I relent. Whatever I was on to.
And there's some documentation to back up. I mean, anyone that wants to research it can, and that there's something going on. It could be multiple causes. It's very difficult to say, but it's not necessarily something to be dismissed.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in to another edition of PsiOp-Radio. We'll be saying adieu and talking to you on the other side. Stay tuned.
Good night.